Earth's towering tsunami waves had knocked the smug expressions off the Galactic Council's smug alien faces when the humans finally shared their powers over the oceans. Those hypocritical xenofuckers had acted so high and mighty before this, with their bullshit rules and laws, and constant mocking of humanity's primitive technology. The Council believed their isolationist policies would keep the primitive human race in the dark about galactic politics, but they didn't know about Captain Douglas Roberts, a grizzled ex-space marine, who had seen some serious shit go down on backwater alien worlds controlled by the Council. Douglas stared at the transponder alert flashing on his freighter ship display. The Mizarians were in deep trouble again. Their aquatic homeworld was under heavy assault again. Those octopus-looking fucks just couldn't stop getting conquered. He took a sip of whiskey and punched the comm unit. "What is it this time, Ambassador Pryler?" The panicked octopoid wiggled his tentacles on the view screen, which was the Mizarian people's way of expressing great distress. "The Vrul have returned, Captain Roberts. They boil our oceans and enslave my people. You must help us." Douglas remembered the last time he helped Pryler. It didn't end so well. The Mizari were isolated and primitive, easy pickings for any of the 1,000 predatory spacefaring empires, but the slimy octopus had dirt on the Galactic Council, which could blow the lid off their whole operation. Truth is, the Council didn't give a shit about enforcing galactic law. They only cared about species who could line their pockets. Leaving those octopi to die wouldn't be good for business in the long run. The old space marine grabbed his plasma rifle. "I'll help you, Pryler, for a price." "Of course, human. We shall give you whatever wealth we have. Just save us from this attack." Douglas ended the comm link. He strode into the freighter cargo bay where the rest of his merc crew were cleaning their weapons and power armor. "All right, you scaly reptoids, cyborgs, and robo-drones. Looks like we've got another suicide mission." His XO, a crusty ex-marine raider with a bionic arm and a glowing red eye, grunted as he racked the slide on a massive Gauss cannon. "It's always a damned suicide mission with you, Captain. When do we get to fight something that can't melt our eyeballs just by looking at us funny?" "When the credits from our dear Squidface ambassador clear. Now lock and load, we've got an entire species to save, and I need to get my oceans-boiling secrets to the Council, so those tentacled fucks understand not to mess with Earth." The freighter shuddered as it dropped out of FTL near Mizari's watery world. Douglas peered out the cockpit window, and his eyes widened. What the hell? A vast field of wrecked ships stretched before them, the remnants of the Mizarian defense fleet. Twisted metal and frozen corpses drifted among the debris. The carnage was total, no ship left unscathed. The captain ordered scans of the nearest derelict. The readings showed molecular destabilization and gravitational warping, hallmarks of advanced weaponry. Gravity distortion fields and plasma, xeno scum used tech banned by the Council. Rip those ships apart at the seams. Suddenly proximity alarms blared. A cloaked mine erupted from the debris in a blinding flash. The freighter lurched as the explosion tore a hole in its hull. Crew were flung from their stations by the blast. Screams of the wounded filled the air. Douglas pulled himself up, head ringing. "Damage report." "Get them to the med bay and seal that breach. This graveyard is a damn trap." As the crew scrambled to save their ship and stabilize the injured, a new threat emerged from the void. A squadron of vicious attack craft swooped towards the crippled freighter, plasma cannons glowing with deadly charge. The enemy fighters had a distinct angular profile, all jagged edges and cruel spikes. Douglas recognized them instantly. Kanthak vessels, flown by the most brutal conquerors in the galaxy. At the head of the pack was a scarred and pitted warship, the personal transport of the infamous Kanthak commander Zortex. Douglas snarled and took the controls. "Divert power to the turrets! Hold those bastards off!" Ghost rounds and plasma bursts lit up the void as the freighter crew fought desperately to survive. Consoles sparked and bulkheads groaned. The ship couldn't take much more. With the Kanthak swarming ever closer, Douglas wrenched the ship into a steep dive towards Mizari. "Hang on, we're going in hot." The freighter plummeted into the atmosphere, enemy shots sizzling past. But as they leveled out over the surface, A new horror filled the crew's eyes. Mizari's endless seas, once sapphire blue, had been reduced to a hellscape of boiling craters. "My God, those Karnthak butchers boiled the whole damn ocean," Douglas said in disbelief. "Where the hell is that octopus?" He brought the freighter down at the coordinates Prylar had sent, the location of Mizari's last stronghold. The city's domes peaked above the roiling waves, massive blast doors sealing them off from the ravaged waters. Douglas and the surviving crew stumbled out of the ship to find Prylar waiting, his tentacles limp with despair. The Mizarian's voice was choked with grief. "The Karnthak have taken everything, boiled away 80% of our oceans. Only a few of us remain now, and the enemy will not stop until Mizari is a lifeless rock. Please, Captain, you must help us. You are our last hope." Inside the battered Mizarian stronghold, Douglas and Prylar huddled with the few remaining octopoid leaders. The mood was grim as they took stock of their situation. "The Karnthak are using an orbital weapon platform to boil our oceans," one elder said, his bioluminescent skin flashing with anger. "They call it the Hydra Cannon." Zack, the freighter's tech whiz, pulled up a hologram of the monstrous device. It resembled a mechanical kraken, with articulated tentacles bristling with turrets. "Scans show it's powered by Xerium-235, an unstable isotope found only in neutron star cores. That's some serious shit." The ambassador's tentacles drooped. "We have a few ships left and some soldiers, but against the Karnthak fleet..." "There'll be a distraction," Douglas pointed at the hologram. "We'll split into 2 teams. Prylar, you lead an assault on the Hydra Cannon, keep 'em busy. Zack and I will take a strike team to their neutron star mining operation and sabotage the Xerium extraction." Zack grinned. "Just like old times, eh, Captain?" "Except with more hentai." Douglas clasped Prylar's tentacle. "It's a long shot, but it's our only chance to save your world." The Mizarians pulsed with a rainbow of determined colors and began preparations. Douglas and Zack equipped their team with deep space combat armor and drilling charges. Prylar's soldiers readied their ships and weapons. But as they worked, alarms suddenly blared throughout the stronghold. The walls shook with distant explosions. Douglas swore, "Zortex must have had a spy in here. We need to move now." Karnthak shock troops poured into the city, plasma rifles blazing. Douglas and his team fought their way to the docking bay, Mizarian soldiers falling all around them. The once pristine underwater metropolis crumbled under the onslaught, domes shattering and corridors flooding. They finally reached their ships, but a squad of Karnthak blocked their path. Douglas and Prylar charged forward, the human blasting with his rifle, the Mizarian lashing out with razor-tipped tentacles. Together they cut through the enemy, their armor barely withstanding the plasma shots. "Go, go," Douglas yelled as they leapt into their ships. He whirled to provide covering fire, only to see Zortex himself striding through the ruins, crackling energy blade in hand. The warlord's eyes burned with malice. "This isn't over, human," Zortex snarled. "Your species will burn just like—" Douglas cut him off with a barrage of gas rounds, forcing the Karnthak to dive for cover. The human vaulted into his ship, slamming the airlock shut. The strike team and the remaining Mizarian ships blasted out of the collapsing city, fleeing into the stars. Douglas sagged into his pilot chair, Zack patching up a plasma burn on his arm. They'd escaped, but the cost had been high. Several of his crew were gone, and Prylar's forces were badly depleted. The captain gazed out at the flaming wreckage of the stronghold, a cold determination settling over him. Zortex had picked the wrong species to fuck with. The Karnthak would pay for this, and the Council would finally see that humanity was done playing nice. It was time to unleash hell. Douglas and his strike team raced through the void in their stolen Karnthak ships, the neutron star looming ahead like a baleful eye. The star's intense gravity warped the very fabric of space around it, a maelstrom of twisted light and crushing force. "All right, team, this is it," Douglas said over the comm, his voice grim. "We get in, plant the charges, and get out. No heroics, no mistakes. Too much is riding on this." The ships slipped into the mining facility's traffic pattern, their stolen IFF codes blending them seamlessly with the Karnthak vessels. Douglas guided his craft into a docking bay, the thud of the landing gear echoing through the hull. The team emerged into the facility proper, a labyrinth of reinforced tunnels and cavernous chambers filled with pulsing machinery. The neutron star's eerie light filtered through crystalline conduits, casting everything in a ghostly blue glow. "Zack, you're up," Douglas said. "Shut down their security. The rest of you with me. We'll take the reactors." Zack nodded, his face pale but determined. He peeled off down a side passage, his Omni-tool already glowing as he hacked into the system. Douglas led the others deeper into the facility, planting demolition charges at key structural points as they went. The explosives stuck to the alien metal with dull clicks, their timers winking red. Suddenly shouts echoed from up ahead. A group of Karnthak engineers had stumbled upon them, energy wrenches and plasma cutters in hand. The aliens roared and opened fire, superheated bolts scorching the air. Douglas and his team dove for cover behind a massive ore crusher. Molten slag sizzled and popped around them. "So much for stealth," Douglas yelled, popping up to unleash a hail of gas rounds. The high-velocity spikes punched through Karnthak armor like paper, painting the walls with ichor. The team fought back with desperate ferocity, using every weapon and tool at their disposal. One of the humans jury-rigged a plasma cutter into an improvised flamethrower, setting a trio of Karnthak ablaze. Another used a gravity lift to hurl a crate of raw xerium into the aliens, the volatile material detonating on impact. Douglas was a whirlwind of destruction, his rifle and vibroknife flashing as he cut down foe after foe, but the Karnthak kept coming, heedless of their losses. A blast of plasma caught Douglas in the shoulder, spinning him around. He crashed to the deck, his armor smoking. A Karnthak loomed over him, energy axe raised for the killing blow. Suddenly the alien's head vaporized, spraying Douglas with ash. Zack stood in the corridor, a smoking heavy plasma rifle braced on his hip. Then Zack collapsed, a blackened hole punched through his stomach. Douglas scrambled to his friend's side, cradling his head. "Stay with me, buddy," Douglas pleaded, his voice cracking. "We're almost done here." Zack coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Get out," he rasped. "Finish it, no matter what." Douglas nodded, tears stinging his eyes. He gently laid Zack down and stood facing his battered team. "You heard the man. Let's move." They raced through the crumbling facility, the neutron star's baleful light flickering as the core destabilized. Alarms howled and Karnthak voices screamed over the intercom. Douglas and the survivors piled into their ships, blasting out of the dock seconds before it collapsed. The mining station shattered behind them, explosions marching across its surface as the charges detonated. But the real payload was the neutron star itself. The xerium explosions had pushed the already unstable core over the edge. It warped and buckled, gravity waves radiating out like ripples in a pond. And then, with a silent flash, the star imploded. The shockwave slammed into the ships like the fist of an angry god, sending them tumbling end over end. Consoles sparked and shrieked, the hull groaning under the strain. Douglas fought with the controls, rerouting power from the ruptured drives. But it was no use, the ships were dead in space. "Escape pods now," he barked, dragging himself to the launch bay. The pods were little more than reinforced coffins, but they were better than nothing. As the pods jettisoned away from the crippled ships, Douglas stared out the viewport at the devastation. The Karnthak fleet hung shattered and lifeless, torn apart by the shockwave. Chunks of neutron star matter, impossibly dense, shot past like bullets. But Douglas's thoughts were light years away, with Prylar and the Mizarians. The shockwave was heading right for them, an unstoppable tsunami of gravity and radiation. He could only pray that they were ready. Because if they failed, if the Hydra cannon survived, then all this would be for nothing. The Karnthak would complete their genocide, and the Council would continue to sit in smug indifference. Douglas clenched his fists, ignoring the pain from his wounds. No, he would not let that happen. Humanity would show the galaxy the price of apathy and cruelty, even if it cost him everything. Light years away, the shockwave from the destabilized neutron star hurtled through the void, an invisible tsunami of gravitational force and deadly radiation. As it slammed into the Mizarian system, the very fabric of space-time shuddered. On the bridge of his flagship, Prylar watched in awe as the shockwave engulfed the Hydra cannon. The monstrous weapon shuddered and convulsed, its power core fluctuating wildly. Erratic beams of superheated plasma lanced out from its tentacles, carving molten scars across the hulls of nearby Karnthak ships. "All ships focus fire on the cannon," Prylar commanded, his bioluminescent skin flashing with urgency. "Target the weak points created by the shockwave." The ragtag Mizarian fleet surged forward, their weapons thrumming with power. Volleys of torpedoes and energy beams converged on the Hydra cannon, exploiting the fractures in its armor. But the Karnthak were far from defeated. Zortex, anticipating the Mizarians' desperate gambit, unleashed a swarm of drone fighters from the bowels of his command ship. The robotic craft poured forth like angry insects, their plasma cannons spitting fire. The drones tore into the Mizarian fleet, their adaptive AIs predicting and countering every maneuver. Ships burst apart under the onslaught, their crews consumed by the merciless void. The octopoid screams of the dying filled the comm channels. Prylar gripped the arms of his command chair, his tentacles clenched in anguish as he watched his people being slaughtered, but he couldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. "Ramming speed," he roared. "Get us in close!" His flagship, the Pride of Mizari, surged ahead, its hull groaning under the strain. The massive vessel plowed through the drone swarm, its point defense lasers carving a path of destruction. Explosions blossomed across its armored hide as drones rammed it in kamikaze attacks. Prylar himself led the charge, his elite warriors at his side. They stormed into the bowels of the Hydra cannon, weapons blazing. The tight corridors became a hellish maze of close-quarters combat, plasma bolts and razor-tipped tentacles carving through Karnthak flesh. The Mizarians fought with the desperate fury of a species on the brink of annihilation. They pushed deeper into the cannon, leaving a trail of shattered corpses in their wake. Finally they reached the pulsing heart of the beast, the power core. Prylar and his soldiers quickly planted their explosives, setting the timers with trembling appendages. Suddenly a blast of searing light filled the chamber. Zortex strode through the smoke, flanked by his elite guard. The Karnthak commander's eyes blazed with malevolent glee. "Leaving so soon, Prylar?" Zortex mocked, his voice dripping with cruelty. "And here I thought we were just getting started." Prylar stepped forward, his bioluminescence pulsing with righteous fury. He knew he couldn't beat Zortex, not with an energy blade shaking in his wounded tentacle, but maybe, just maybe, he could buy his people the time they needed. "Zortex!" Prylar shouted, his voice booming through the chamber. "I challenge you to single combat in the ancient tradition of our people." The Karnthak warlord threw back his head and laughed, the sound echoing obscenely off the walls. "You honor me, Mizarian filth," Zortex sneered. "It will be a pleasure to crush the life from you myself." Prylar's warriors hesitated, unwilling to leave their leader, but Prylar fixed them with a stern glare, his thoughts projected through a psychic link. "Go. Detonate the charges. Save our people." With aching reluctance, the Mizarians retreated, fighting their way back to the Pride. Prylar turned to face Zortex, his tentacles coiled in a battle stance. The two commanders charged each other, blades clashing in a storm of sparks. They dueled amid the thrumming machinery, Prylar's agility against Zortex's brutal strength. The Mizarian landed blow after blow, his electrified tentacles searing the Karnthak's flesh. But Zortex shrugged off the wounds, his regenerative armor knitting them back together. With a roar of triumph, Zortex's blade found its mark, impaling Prylar through the chest. The Mizarian leader convulsed, bioluminescent blood spilling from his beak. But even as the life drained from him, Prylar lashed out with a final desperate attack. His razor-tipped tentacles punctured Zortex's eyes, bursting them in a spray of ichor. The Karnthak reeled back, howling in agony. At that moment, a deep rumble shook the Hydra cannon, building to a deafening crescendo. Pryla watched through dimming vision as Zortek stumbled to his ship, his elite guard dragging him inside. The Karnthak craft blasted free of the cannon mere seconds before the power core detonated. The Hydra cannon shattered like a cheap ornament, pulverized by its own writhing energy. The Mizarian fleet scattered, fleeing the blast radius. As the pride of Mizari tumbled away, Pryla's warriors scanned desperately for their leader's life signs. But there was nothing. Pryla, the hero who had bought them their victory with his life, was gone. Light years away, Douglas and his surviving crew drifted in their escape pods, numb with grief and exhaustion. The sudden arrival of a Galactic Council ship with its sleek silver hull and gleaming insignia should have been a relief. But as the haughty Council representatives beamed aboard, their expressions a mix of condescension and calculated sympathy, Douglas felt only rage. "The Council expresses its deepest regrets for the tragic loss of life," one of the representatives said, her voice carefully modulated. "We have been monitoring the situation, but the Mizarians are a primitive species. Our non-interference directive—" Douglas cut her off with a snarl, his hand twitching towards his sidearm. "Non-interference, is that what you call sitting on your asses while an entire species is exterminated?" The Council representatives exchanged uneasy glances, clearly not used to such blatant defiance. "Captain Roberts," another said, his tone hardening, "the Council's decisions are not for you to question." "To the hell they aren't," Douglas roared. He jabbed a finger at the viewscreen, where the shattered remains of the Hydra cannon drifted amid the bodies of the fallen. "Look at that. That's the price of your cowardice, your precious fucking directive." Douglas's surviving crew members gathered around him, their eyes blazing with the same righteous fury. They had seen too many horrors, lost too many friends, to let this stand. "You will send aid to the Mizarians," Douglas growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You will help them rebuild, and you will ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. Or I swear by every star in the galaxy, I will burn your fucking council to the ground." The representatives paled, their smug superiority crumbling in the face of Douglas's wrath. They knew the kind of man they were dealing with now, a man who had stared into the abyss and come out the other side, a man who would move heaven and earth to keep his word. "We will do as you say, Captain," the lead representative stammered. "The Council will provide whatever assistance the Mizarians require." "Damn right you will," Douglas spat. He turned to his crew, his eyes softening with shared grief and ironclad resolve. "Let's go. We have work to do." As the Council ship disengaged, leaving the battered human vessel behind, Douglas stared out at the stars. He thought of Pryla, of Zack, of all the brave souls who had given their lives to stop the Karnthak. Their sacrifice would not be in vain. Douglas would make sure of that. He would drag the Council kicking and screaming into the light, and he would ensure that the Mizarians and every other species out there were protected. No matter the cost. Douglas stared at the message on his datapad, his knuckles white as he gripped the device. The words were sparse, the encryption heavy, but the implication was clear. Pryla was alive, and Zortex had him. He slammed the datapad onto the table, the clatter echoing through the cramped briefing room. The few sympathetic council members and his remaining crew looked up, startled. The room erupted into a chorus of disbelief and outrage. The council members argued about jurisdiction, about the risk of provoking further conflict. His crew, still battered from their last encounter with the Karnthak, exchanged uneasy glances. But Douglas silenced them all with a glare. "I'm not asking for permission. I'm not even asking for volunteers. This is something I have to do, but I could use your help." One by one his crew nodded, their expressions hardening with resolve. Even the council members, after a tense moment, agreed to provide what support they could. They tracked Zortex's ship to a desolate planet on the fringes of known space. a lifeless rock pockmarked with craters and jagged canyons. Scans revealed a hidden base nestled deep within a labyrinthine cave system. As they approached, Douglas couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The base's defenses were formidable, but their approach was too easy, too uncontested. The infiltration team moved through the twisting corridors of the base, the air thick with the stench of chemicals and burnt flesh. Strange guttural screams echoed from the depths, setting their teeth on edge. They found the holding cells, rows of transparent pods filled with viscous green fluid. Floating within were Mizarians, or what was left of them. Their bodies were twisted, warped by gruesome experiments. Grafted to their flesh were cybernetic enhancements, weapons fused directly to bone and sinew. And there in the center pod was Prylar. His once vibrant skin was pale, mottled with scars. His eyes, when they flickered open, were filled with unimaginable pain. "Douglas," Prylar rasped, his voice a thin whisper. "You shouldn't have come, it's a trap." Alarms blared to life, the base shuddering as blast doors slammed shut. Over the intercom, Zortex's laughter boomed, cruel and mocking. "Welcome, Captain Roberts," the Karnthak sneered. "I see you've discovered my little project. Beautiful, aren't they? The perfect fusion of Mizarian adaptability and Karnthak brutality. And now they hunger for human flesh." The pods hissed open, releasing a tide of twisted, genetically enhanced monstrosities. They surged forward, their movements jerky and unnatural, their mouths open in wordless screams. Douglas and his team opened fire, the corridors lit by the strobe of muzzle flashes. But for every abomination they cut down, 2 more took its place, heedless of the wounds that stitched their flesh. They fought their way back to the ship, a running battle through the nightmarish halls of the base. Prylar, draped over Douglas's shoulders, fired weakly with a stolen plasma pistol, his aim shaky but determined. They blasted out of the base, the ship's hull scorched by the flames of chemical explosions. But as they broke atmosphere, Zortex's ship appeared, a predatory shadow against the stars. Cannon fire raked across their shields, alarms blaring in protest. Douglas, his face grim, wrenched the controls, sending them hurtling towards the dense asteroid field that ringed the planet. The ship shuddered as it plunged into the field, the viewport filled with tumbling rock and shards of ice. Behind them, Zortex's ship followed, its guns blazing, uncaring of the destruction it wreaked upon itself. Douglas jinked and wove through the deadly maze, the ship's hull groaning under the strain. Asteroids shattered around them, filling the void with a hail of razor-sharp shrapnel. In the co-pilot's seat, Prylar struggled to man the ship's weapons, his tentacles slick with his own blood. With a shout of triumph, he landed a hit, the Karnthak ship's shields flickering under the impact. But Zortex was relentless, his eyes alight with madness as he pursued them deeper into the field. The 2 ships danced a deadly waltz, trading fire amidst the whirling chaos of the asteroids. "We're sitting ducks out here," Prylar shouted over the chaos, his tentacles working frantically to reroute power. "Zortex will be on us in minutes." Douglas gritted his teeth, scanning the asteroid's pitted surface. There, nestled among the craters, was a gaping chasm. "There, we'll take shelter in that cave. Try to buy ourselves some time." With a grunt of effort, he guided the crippled ship into the chasm, plunging them into darkness. The vessel scraped against the narrow walls, metal screeching against stone, before finally coming to rest in a vast, hollow chamber. As the crew emerged from the battered ship, they found themselves in an alien landscape. Towering machines, long dormant, loomed in the shadows. Skeletal walkways and rusted pipes crisscrossed the cavern, remnants of a long-dead mining operation. "Spread out, search for anything we can use," Douglas ordered. "Zach, see what you can do about the hyperdrive." The crew fanned out into the facility, picking their way through the debris. Strange symbols adorned the walls, the language of a forgotten civilization. Prylar ran his tentacles over the glyphs, his eyes widening. "I've seen this before," he whispered, "in the ancient archives of my people. This place predates even the oldest Galactic Council records." As they ventured deeper, A pulsing glow caught their attention. It emanated from a hidden chamber, sealed behind a massive blast door. Douglas and Pryler exchanged a glance, then heaved the door open, metal grinding against metal. Inside, hovering in the center of the room, was an orb of pure energy. It thrummed with power, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Tendrils of light seemed to reach out towards them, drawn to their presence. "What is it?" Douglas breathed, transfixed by the sight. Before Pryler could answer, a deafening explosion rocked the chamber. Dust rained down from the ceiling as a gaping hole was blasted in the far wall. Through the smoke, the hulking forms of Karnthak soldiers emerged, Zortex at their head. "I thought you could hide from me?" the warlord snarled, his eyes glinting with malice. "This ends now, human." All hell broke loose. Plasma bolts and Gauss rounds filled the air as the two sides clashed. Douglas's crew took cover behind the ancient machinery, using the mining equipment as improvised weapons. A plasma cutter became a makeshift flamethrower, sending Karnthak warriors screaming as they were engulfed in flames. A gravity lift hurled soldiers into the air, smashing them against the unyielding rock. In the chaos, a stray shot struck the energy orb. It pulsed brightly, then released a blinding wave of force. Every weapon and device in the chamber sputtered and died, the electromagnetic pulse frying their circuits. Suddenly, the battle was reduced to hand-to-hand combat. Douglas found himself face-to-face with Zortex, the two leaders grappling among the ruins. They traded blows, fists, and feet, crashing against armor. Zortex's augmented strength was formidable, but Douglas's fury was unrelenting. Around them, the orb's energy grew more unstable, lashing out in arcs of lightning. The very fabric of the asteroid began to unravel, the ancient rock crumbling under the onslaught. If the artifact fully destabilized, it would tear the entire asteroid apart. And still Douglas and Zortex fought on, oblivious to the destruction around them. In that moment nothing existed but their hatred, their desire to see the other broken at their feet. The fate of the Mizarians, the fate of the galaxy itself, hung in the balance as these two titans clashed. The asteroid quaked and shuddered, massive chunks of rock breaking away as Douglas and Zortex brawled. Their armored fists smashed into each other's faces and torsos, denting metal and bruising flesh. Douglas ducked under a wild haymaker and drove his knee into Zortex's gut. The Karnthak grunted but caught Douglas in a headlock, slamming him into a crumbling wall. "Your species is pathetic," Zortex snarled as he tightened his grip. "Weak, divided. You'll fall before the might of the Karnthak." Douglas gritted his teeth and jabbed his elbow into Zortex's side, breaking free. "We're tougher than you think," he spat, wiping blood from his mouth. In the heart of the facility, Zack and the others raced against time. The artifact pulsed erratically, its light flickering as the asteroid disintegrated around it. "Careful," Zack shouted as Pryler reached for the orb. "One wrong move and this whole place could blow." Pryler steadied his tentacles. "We don't have a choice, it's our only way out." They worked frantically, splicing cables and rewiring circuits. The ship's power core thrummed as they funneled the artifact's energy into its depleted cells. Douglas and Zortex crashed through a decaying bulkhead, grappling on the edge of a widening chasm. The ground tilted beneath them, nearly sending them plummeting into the abyss. With a roar of defiance, Douglas rolled on top of Zortex and rained down blows, battering the Karnthak's helmeted head. But Zortex surged upward, throwing Douglas off and slamming him against a support beam. Stars exploded across Douglas's vision as Zortex's hands closed around his throat. He scrabbled at the alien's grip, his strength fading. "I'll enjoy watching your world burn," Zortex hissed. "Just like the Mizarians, your oceans will boil and your cities will crumble, and from the ashes the Karnthak will rise, stronger than ever." Rage and desperation flooded Douglas's veins. He wouldn't let this happen, couldn't let Earth suffer the same fate as Mizari. With a last desperate surge of strength, he brought his legs up and kicked Zortex square in the chest. The Karnthak stumbled back, arms windmilling. He teetered on the edge of the chasm for a single eternal moment, and then he fell, howling in fury as the darkness swallowed him. Douglas staggered to his feet, gasping for breath. The asteroid was coming apart at the seams, the ancient metal groaning and screeching. He had to get back to the ship. He limped through the disintegrating corridors, dodging falling debris and leaping over widening gaps. At last he reached the hangar, where Zack and the others were waiting. "Go, go," he yelled, throwing himself into the ship. The engines roared to life, the artifact's power surging through them. They rocketed out of the hangar just as the asteroid imploded, a massive shock wave chasing them into the void. As they cleared the expanding debris field, a priority comm signal blared across the cockpit speakers. Douglas's blood ran cold as he read the message. "Earth is under attack," he said, his voice grim. "The Karnthak have targeted our oceans with Hydra cannons." Zack swore viciously. Those bastards, how did they build more so quickly? Pryla's skin rippled with distress. They must have constructed them in secret, hidden from the Council. Douglas slammed his fist against the bulkhead, ignoring the pain that lanced up his arm. He had fought so hard, sacrificed so much, and still his worst fears were coming true. "Set a course for Earth," he ordered, his jaw tight. "We're not losing another world to these monsters." As the ship hurtled through the stars, Earth's blue and green sphere growing larger in the view screen, Douglas felt a cold, implacable resolve settle over him. The Karnthak had picked the wrong planet to fuck with. This time, there would be no mercy, no holding back. This time they would finish it. As Earth loomed into view, Douglas and his crew were horrified to see the devastation that awaited them. The planet's once pristine oceans roiled and steamed, massive Hydra cannons hovering ominously above. Karnthak warships rained plasma blasts upon coastal cities, reducing them to rubble. Desperate transmissions flooded the comms, Earth's defenses overwhelmed by the sudden onslaught. Moments later, the haughty face of a council representative appeared on the view screen. Douglas wasted no time with pleasantries. "Earth is under attack! We need immediate support!" The representative's expression remained impassive. "Our fleet is still committed to Mizarian relief efforts. Earth will have to hold out until—" "To hell with that," Douglas snarled. "If Earth falls, the Karnthak will have a foothold to conquer the whole damn galaxy." The screen went blank, the Council unwilling to argue further. Douglas turned to his crew, his expression grim. "We're on our own. Zack, take your team and disrupt their comms and targeting. Pryla, you and the Mizarians focus on taking out those Hydra cannons." Pryla nodded, his tentacles coiling with determination. "We won't fail you, Douglas." As the teams split off to their tasks, Douglas opened a channel to Earth's military command. "This is Captain Douglas Roberts. I'm taking command of the planetary defense. All units report in." Acknowledgements crackled through the comms as Douglas outlined his battle plan. On the ground, soldiers and civilians alike took up arms, ready to defend their world to the last. Fighters and bombers screamed through the skies to meet the Karnthak head-on. In the oceans, Pryla and his Mizarian strike teams launched daring assaults on the Hydra cannons. They swarmed over the monstrous machines like ants, planting explosives and sabotaging key systems. Many fell to the Karnthak's defenses, but they fought on undaunted. Meanwhile, Zack and his hackers worked feverishly to pierce the Karnthak's digital defenses. They wormed their way into enemy systems, planting viruses and sowing chaos. Karnthak ships began to fire on each other as their targeting systems went haywire. But even as they fought back, a new horror emerged from the depths. Massive, twisted shapes breached the waves, genetically engineered abominations, Mizarian DNA perverted into engines of destruction. These monsters, immune to the Hydra cannon's boiling rays, tore into coastal cities with savage glee. "Oh my God," Douglas breathed as reports flooded in. "They've weaponized the Mizarians' own biology against us." He opened a channel to all forces. "New priority target. Take out those monsters before they level every city on the coast." As the battle raged on, Douglas couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The Karnthak had played their hand, and now it was up to him and his allies to find a way to counter it. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the galaxy, hung in the balance. In the bowels of Douglas's battered ship, the alien artifact pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. Zack and the tech team worked feverishly to retrofit the device into a makeshift EMP bomb, their faces grim with determination. "Sounds risky as hell," Zack said, wiping sweat from his brow. "But if we can get this thing into the upper atmosphere and detonate it, it should fry the Karnthak systems and give us a fighting chance. Someone will have to manually trigger the detonation, and at that altitude, with that kind of energy discharge..." Zack trailed off, his implication clear. Pryler stepped forward, his tentacles coiled with resolve. "I'll do it, my people, my responsibility." Douglas started to protest, but the look in Pryler's eyes stopped him. The Mizarian was haunted by the loss of his world, driven by a need for vengeance that went beyond reason. "All right," Douglas said at last, "but you're not going alone. We'll launch a full assault on the Karnthak fleet, draw their fire while you get into position." The plan set, they prepared for the final battle. Earth's remaining ships, battered but unbowed, formed up around Douglas's vessel. Pryler boarded a small, cloaked ship, the EMP device secured in its hold. As Earth's fleet engaged the Karnthak, the void lit up with the fire of 1,000 suns. Ships exploded and burned, torn apart by plasma and missiles. Douglas led the charge, his guns blazing, drawing the enemy's attention away from Pryler's cloaked ship. Pryler wove through the chaos, his small craft darting between the behemoths that battled around him. The Karnthak formation loomed ahead, a wall of bristling metal and death. Suddenly, a ship broke away from the enemy ranks, Zortex's fighter, heavily armed and bearing down on Pryler like a bird of prey. The warlord had survived the destruction of the asteroid base, and now he sought to finish what he'd started. Laser fire stitched the void as the two ships dueled, Pryler's agility matched against Zortex's firepower. They danced a deadly waltz, hulls scarred and shields failing. With a burst of speed, Pryler looped behind Zortex and unleashed a salvo of missiles. The warlord's ship vanished in a blossoming fireball, but not before its guns found their mark. Pryler's ship reeled, alarms screaming as systems failed. He coughed, tasting blood, his vision blurring. The EMP device blinked, ready to unleash its power, but his dying ship wouldn't reach the detonation point. With a last effort, Pryler opened a comm channel. "Douglas, thank you for everything, for giving my people a chance to fight back." "Pryler, wait!" Douglas's voice crackled, but Pryler cut him off. Pryler's tentacle stabbed down on the detonator. The alien device flared, a sun being born in the depths of space. A massive pulse erupted from Pryler's disintegrating ship, a wave of energy that washed over the battling fleets. Karnthak ships went dark, their systems fried. The Hydra cannons, those monstrous machines that had boiled oceans and ended worlds, fell silent and still. On Earth's surface, the genetically engineered abominations that had been unleashed upon the seas convulsed as their control signals were severed. They turned on each other in a frenzy of tooth and claw, the waves churning red with their blood. The oceans, which had been on the brink of oblivion, began to still. The boiling slowed, then stopped. Earth, against all odds, had been saved. But the cost had been tremendous. Pryler was gone, sacrificing himself to end the war he'd started, and Douglas, watching from the bridge of his ship as the Karnthak fleet drifted in ruin, felt the weight of that sacrifice like a stone in his heart. Earth had won, but the scars would linger long after the fires of battle had cooled. The Mizarians, homeless and broken, would need to find a new life on an alien world. And Douglas, the hero who had led them to victory, would have to find a way to live with the choices he'd made and the friends he'd lost. As the Galactic Council ships arrived, too late to do more than help pick up the pieces, Douglas stared out at the stars, his eyes haunted. They had won the battle, but the war, the true war, against the darkness in the void and in the hearts of all living things, was far from over. And he would be ready for it, no matter the cost. Douglas stood on the bridge of his ship, watching as the Galactic Council vessels moved among the wreckage of the battle. They were efficient. He had to give them that. Medical ships tending to the wounded, salvage crews sifting through the debris for anything useful. But it all felt too little, too late. He turned as the doors hissed open, admitting a group of Mizarian survivors. They were a ragged bunch, their bioluminescent skin dim with grief and exhaustion, but there was a steel in their eyes, a determination that even the loss of their world couldn't extinguish. The leader, a scarred warrior who had fought beside Prylar in those last desperate hours, approached Douglas. "Captain," he said, his voice a rasp, "my people owe you a debt we can never repay." Douglas shook his head. "I did what anyone would have done." "No," the Mizarian insisted. "You gave us hope when we had none. You fought for us when the galaxy turned its back. We will not forget that." He held out a tentacle, and Douglas grasped it firmly. An understanding passed between them, a shared pain and a shared resolve. "What will you do now?" Douglas asked. "Earth is open to you, but—" Douglas nodded, his throat tight. Prylar was a hero, they all were. "And so are you, Captain. Never doubt that." The Mizarian turned to go, then paused. "There is something you should know. Before he died, Prylar shared a vision with me, a vision of a darkness beyond the Karnthak, beyond anything we've ever known. He believed that this was only the beginning." A chill ran down Douglas's spine. "The beginning of what?" "Of the true war, the war for the soul of the galaxy itself." The Mizarian's eyes were distant, haunted. Prylar saw it in those final moments. And now, I fear, so do I. He left, leaving Douglas alone with his thoughts. The captain stared out at the stars, suddenly feeling very small and very afraid. They had won today, but at what cost? And what new horrors lurked out there, waiting for their moment to strike? He didn't know. But as he watched the council ships flitting about, as he thought of the brave souls who had given their lives so that others might live, he made a silent vow. He would be ready. Whatever came, whatever darkness rose from the depths of the void, he would stand against it. For Earth, for the Mizarians, for all the worlds that called this galaxy home. No matter the cost. Douglas stared at the datapad in his hand, the casualty report scrolling endlessly before his eyes. So many names, so many lives cut short. And for what? A moment's peace, a fleeting victory against an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with every passing day. He thought of Zack lying in the medbay, his body broken but his spirit undiminished. Of Prylar sacrificing himself to save a world that wasn't even his own. Of all the brave souls who had followed him into the fire, never questioning, never hesitating. They deserved better. They deserved a galaxy that wasn't constantly teetering on the brink of annihilation. They deserved a future. He set the datapad aside and pulled up the comm system. There were calls to make, favors to call in. The Galactic Council might be content to sit back and lick their wounds, but he wasn't. The Karnthak had been defeated, but they were just one threat among many. The Mizarians had learned that lesson the hard way, and Earth had come perilously close to doing the same. Never again. He would make sure of it. Whether it took a year or a decade or the rest of his life, he would find a way to bring lasting peace to this troubled galaxy. For Zack, for Prylar, for everyone who had ever looked up at the stars and dreamed of a better tomorrow. He opened a channel, his resolve hardening with every passing second. The war might be over, but the fight had just begun. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.